Good evening, this is Maestro Cortello with the Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today we have a 1v1 on Green Tooth Gorge, classic map, classic player right here, Texcalibur, the famous Sword of Legend, playing as this slightly tanky Commissar Lord who just turned on his free energy shield. The Commissar Lord is, I already said that, but basically he's this guy, his face is all messed up, lost it in a fight or something. He can execute his own troops to make them fight harder. Texcalibur's opponent is GiDDoLo, or GiDDoLo, a very interesting character who I've had some interesting conversations with in chats. He is playing as the Space Marine Apothecary, a healing hero, not a very powerful fighter, but good at healing. Alright. So Texcalibur, the famous Sword of Legend, is activating his energy shield seemingly for no reason, but I'm guessing he's doing it so that he'll start losing energy, or he'll start taking damage from his energy shield first, as opposed to taking health damage. And that's useful because if you have to retreat your Commissar, you don't get to get your shield up when you're retreating him. So it just goes straight to health. Basically, the shield disables when you retreat. So if you lose most of your health with the Commissar and then activate the energy shield, if you have to retreat out of the engagement, you won't have any health, and you won't be able to use the energy shield to save yourself. Guardsmen do jump in the building. Now, the Apothecary can upgrade to Purification Vials as an anti-garrison choice, a very powerful anti-garrison choice, and I actually love getting that warrior on the Apothecary. So, Tex has taken a clear edge in map control. And I think GiDDoLo chose not to get a second scout. I don't think that's that bad of a choice in this matchup. Against Imperial Guards, scouts often just seem to bleed without actually having as much of an impact. And I mean, if you still have two scouts, that's still definitely a lot of ranged firepower that you can whittle down guardsmen with. Although a second tac squad could be more useful in this matchup. A second tac squad is often considered not really useful for Space Marine, or at least not practical because of how expensive it is and how much that will delay your tech to get a second tac squad out instead of using that requisition to buy generators. Now the Sentinel is just standing here. I thought he was going to stomp the Tactical Marines. He does eventually do that. So the Commissar Lord actually winning that engagement. And the Apothecary, I was actually surprised to see him just run and hide in the building. But I guess he's not going to beat the Commissar Lord in a straight fight. I think the heal was used, and he was still losing that fight. Texcalibur did buy Catachan Devils. Catachan Devils are an Imperial Guard unit. That's just me having trouble improvising and buying time with words. He is upgrading to the Demolition Man on his Catachan Devils. That Demo Man will give the squad another shotgun, so it does increase the damage of the squad. It also allows the Catachan Devils to drop or to put improvised explosives on the ground. So GiDDoLo got a Devastator Marine squad. Suppression teams are generally pretty good against Imperial Guard because they do not have a jump unit. Now, in Tier 2, they do get the Manticore, which is one of the hardest setup team counters in the game. New in the Elite mod, of course, there is the Artillery Spotter, which is also a pretty hard counter to suppression teams. That being said, GiDDoLo has one Devastator, and he just got another one, so two suppression teams is especially going to be tough for the Imperial Guard. Tex actually upgraded to the Aura of Discipline Wargear. Now, the Commissar has Stubbornness in Tier 2, which will heal the Commissar when his men are around him. Aura of Discipline is the opposite. It will heal his men when they're around him. So the Apothecary is got the decap off, but he was definitely taking a lot of fire from those Catachan Devils. GiDDoLo is activating Kraken Bolts, even though he didn't have to there. They will not do extra damage to the Catachans. They will do extra damage to that Sentinel, however. Devastator Marines, I think, a little too close to each other. So GiDDoLo is, ironically, GiDDoLo is the one holding the line as Space Marine. Usually Imperial Guard, both in fluff and in the game, is more of the is more of a hold-the-line race. Improvised explosives go off, do kill one Devastator Marine squad, and those Devastators should get out of there. So pretty good use of those improvised explosives. And GiDDoLo does not have a Scout Sergeant, so he cannot see those improvised explosives. Does not have any unit to detect them with. So GiDDoLo's holding the line, but he's obviously losing a bit on VPs, down by almost 100 VPs. With that Devastator Marine build, he will have a relatively static army, because obviously these Devastator Marines are just not very mobile. They need to be set up in order to be effective. Tex, on the other hand, does have that very mobile Commissar with speed 5.5. Of course, all of his units are just regular infantry units. They don't need to set up. And then that Sentinel is, of course, very fast, does have speed 8, gets around the map very quickly. I feel like Tex is just kind of standing around a bit, and GiDDoLo is actually taking advantage of that to capture the map. Although Tex is responding now, does see that he's losing a requisition point, moves his Commissar over there. Now the Commissar could get the Power Sword in Tier 1, which is definitely useful against Space Marines. Will give him a 50 DPS power melee weapon in Tier 1. Will be very useful for bleeding TAC models as well as Devastator Marines models, much more so than his starting sword. In fact, with the Commissar with his starting sword, I actually feel like he does not do that well against Tactical Marines with his starting sword, because it just doesn't really do enough damage, and then the attacks actually do pretty respectable melee damage. So the Sentinel is actually just tanking the damage, is not even really being repaired. This Guardsman squad does need to start repairing. So that Devastator did lose a model from the Sentinel, since obviously the Sentinel does not get suppressed, but the Devastators do stay on the field and force off that Sentinel. GiDDoLo actually now taking the advantage in map control. Whoa, oh! Okay, never mind. I actually thought GiDDoLo had a third Devastator, but GiDDoLo is already in tier 2, and he is getting a Razorback. So Tex cannot yet deal with a Razorback, in part since he's still in Tier 1. He is upgrading to Tier 2. He did not choose to get the Power Sword as on his Commissar, and one of the other choices you can make is you can skip the Power Sword and just go straight to the Power Fist. The Power Fist will actually do more damage against heavy infantry. It does heavy melee damage, which does not have a bonus against heavy infantry, but it just has a much higher base DPS, so it will actually do more damage to heavy infantry than the Power Sword, as well as threatening vehicles. The Razorback is here, the Assault Transport. GiDDoLo straight up gets the reinforced armor plating. There have been some discussions about whether or not that's worth it. A Red Rupee, Dawn of War 2 caster extraordinaire, his personal opinion is that he just gets it, doesn't even think about it. It is, of course, it is just an extra resources that you're spending. Dullahan, on the other hand, a very good player, has said that he feels he can't justify the cost of getting the extra armor. That extra armor is an extra 200 health. On the Razorback, which only starts with 400, that is a 50% increase. And I personally think that increases the survivability of the squad a lot. I certainly am not discounting the fact that it does cost resources to put that extra armor on, but I think it can be the difference between keeping a Razorback alive and losing it. Now, I think eventually you're probably going to lose the Razorback anyway. Much like the Sentinel, I think it's a unit that will eventually die, but I think having that extra armor will keep it alive much longer. Now the Sentinel does have the Sentinel missile launcher. It was shooting frag missiles at first, but it switched to crack missiles so it can do damage to that Sentinel. I mean, to this Razorback. The Razorback does back off, in part because GiDDoLo himself does not really have AV that, or... No, actually, I'm getting confused. I lost my train of thought, not even going to finish it. But GiDDoLo lost a Scout Squad and is actually going straight to Tier 3 pretty fast. Tex has a Manticore, which I have not seen him use yet. But the Manticore does have some experience. That means it has been used, has killed something. I wonder if maybe it was involved in actually wiping that Scout Squad. The Apothecary does upgrade to the Mastercrafted Bolter. I think that's an extremely good choice in this matchup. particularly against Imperial Guard, having such a range-centric army. It can be hard to get in on them with melee, and many units that try to get in on melee against Imperial Guard will get focused down, and then even if they do get in, the Sentinel will stomp them. So the Apothecary, without the Mastercrafted Bolter, definitely has relatively little ability to contribute to combat without the Mastercrafted Bolter. Manticore Strike does go down. I was going to say scares off one of the Devastator Marine squads and actually takes out that Razorback. So Commissar actually still does not have a weapon, but does have Bionic Eye. Personally, when I play the Commissar, I like to get the Flak Jacket. That probably is the favorite, just because you can use it on other units. Gives the Commissar a powerful offensive ability. Bionic Eye adds defensive benefits to Inspire Courage, so in addition to giving a 100% damage buff to whatever unit you execute, it also gives some defensive benefits. I don't remember what they are exactly, but I'm just going to say off the top of my head, and I could be wrong here, that it gives suppression resistance, if not immunity, as well as damage resistance. Devastators are setting up. Now, these Devastators, although they are good against Imperial Guard, at least in Tier 1, right now they definitely are going to have issues with a Manticore on the field. That Manticore on the field, obviously, at least the Devastators are split, so only one of those Devastators will get hit by the Manticore. But there isn't a whole lot you can do to stop the Manticore in that case. You can't really move the Devastator quickly once it's set up. The safest thing you can actually do is retreat your Devastators, but if you do that, basically you just give up the field presence as well as the suppression of having that Devastator on the field. Predator tank now out for GiDDoLo. He puts extra armor on this as well, so that's an extra 200 health for the Predator. Not as much a big of a percent increase as on the Razorback, but I still think that's worth it personally. 200 health. Just an extra 200 health makes it pretty high health for a tank, especially considering also the damage that the Predator can put out. So it just comes out to a unit that's both doing good damage and being tanky enough, I'd say. That Apothecary, of course, also with the Mastercrafted Bolter, does get the full auto ability. So that does actually do a lot to nullify the Commissar. I actually find the Commissar can be pretty annoying, just with most of dealing with Imperial Guard is trying to figure out a way to deal with the range blob. And usually you can't fight, well, you can, but it's not the greatest idea to just fight up with your ranged units straight up against Imperial Guard range units, since range units from most other races will bleed disproportionately in comparison to Guardsmen. Usually you want to deal with Guardsmen in some other fashion, like hitting them with a Devastator plasma cannon shot, or suppressing them with a regular Devastator. In this case, other options, right now the main other option, of course, is to attack the Devastators or attack the Guardsmen with this las cannon Predator. Now, I think GiDDoLo, it can be risky, but I think he actually should have pressed his advantage a bit, having that Predator out on the field while Tex does not have much in terms of AV, and use it to take out the Manticore. Unfortunately, he is not doing that, and he's going to give up the advantage of having a tank on the field, or at least having a tank on the field relatively unopposed, since Tex is getting his own tank. And one of the things I learned recently is that a fully upgraded Lehman Russ with a Vanquisher cannon will actually beat a las cannon Predator, a fully upgraded las cannon Predator, in direct combat. And of course, there are other things to consider. There are different units. This Scout Squad is definitely a little bit low on health. A Manticore Strike goes in, does kill one of those Devastator models. Now, there's not too much you can do, certainly not with a Devastator, to dodge a Manticore Strike. And you're definitely going to lose at least one model for on a given Manticore Strike. You can actually lose the entire squad from one Manticore Strike. So it is a risk to just keep them in there. It depends a lot on where the missiles hit, though, as well as where the Devastators get knocked back after hitting. So these Catachans doing actually extraordinarily well, tanking a lot of damage because they do have that. Because they have been using that smoke grenade, and Tex has actually been using his Manticore very effectively as a V. I mean, if there are any units that can really get away from a Manticore strike, it's a vehicle that with a fast speed. We've obviously seen, though, Tex hitting those vehicles, destroying the Razorback, almost destroying this Predator, and I think Tex is actually doing what GiDDoLo should have done, which he's pressing forward. He has the advantage with GiDDoLo's tank having no health. So he's sending that Leman Russ in, does not have the Vanquisher, but it will not matter, and he actually just straight up takes out the Predator. So very smart play by Tex. Press the advantage right there, or, I mean, he knew he had that advantage with the Leman Russ. Or, I mean, with the Predator having almost no health. And, I mean, Tex could have cautiously felt like, oh, but GiDDoLo might get a Las Cannon Devastator, and we do see that Las Cannon Devastator right here. But clearly, it obviously just wasn't around in time to save that Predator. Now we do have a dead Predator. That was a fully upgraded Predator as well. And right now, it certainly looks like this game is going to go in favor of Tex. I mean, the game isn't over, but he is getting a second tank. GiDDoLo just lost his tank. GiDDoLo does have more resources, could buy a new tank, but I mean, as I've said, and as I've learned, a fully upgraded Leman Russ does lose to a fully upgraded Predator. I'm sorry, other way around. Fully upgraded Predator loses to a fully upgraded Leman Russ. And the Sentinel actually just goes in offensively, does not even stomp, but definitely threatens just by its presence, and gets some of those units to retreat. Tex now, obviously he was actually behind in VPs. He's at 184 to 321, but he is about to threaten a triple cap, and especially now with him having army dominance. GiDDoLo is getting a Land Raider Redeemer, and that is a bad idea. That is just straight up a bad idea for so many reasons. First of all, Tex now having two tanks. Tanks functioning as a V. Probably not the strongest AV, but certainly functioning as a V. And if Tex wants to make his tanks even better as AV, he can put Vanquisher cannons on them. Ooh, Scout Squad, I think here. What, will it get wiped? No. So, no weapon upgrade on the Commissar Lord, which I am a little surprised to see. Maybe he will get Fist of Brachus. But the game might also be coming to a close. So I was saying about that Land Raider Redeemer. Honestly, not a good choice. The tanks actually will counter the Land Raider Redeemer, especially if they get Vanquisher cannons. This Manticore, we've already seen Tex do a very good job of using his Manticore as a V against the Predator and the Razorback. And those are units that actually have the speed to get away from the Manticore shots. The Land Raider Redeemer does not, and it will take a ton of damage from a single Manticore strike. So, Commissar Lord doing reasonably well. He's mostly been using the Commissar Lord as support. I'm surprised to see him not at least get a weapon upgrade. He would be at a higher level if he had a weapon upgrade, and he would just be able to do more in terms of fighting, but he's using him mainly as support. I guess that does mean he can keep the Commissar on the field longer. And he might be choosing, with that aura of discipline, he might actually be choosing to emphasize the support capabilities of the Commissar instead of the fighting capabilities of the Commissar. So now with that triple cap, Tex is now winning on the victory points. Tex, yeah, I was going to say probably pretty close to pop cap with two tanks. At this point, I definitely think it would be worth it to get those Vanquisher cannons, unless he really wants to get, unless he feels he really wants to actually get Executioners instead. And with Tex being at the point where he can't really buy too many more units, he should get upgrades. He does have a few resources, could get at least one Vanquisher. Although he might just pin GiDDoLo in this area right here, and he'll still be winning with the 2 cap.
We have an edge for now.
Let's see that. Alright, and now the Commissar finally does get a weapon. It does get the Fist of Brachus. That Fist of Brachus, you don't... Well, I mean, you will eventually see it. I feel like you don't see it that often. It is a Tier 3 war gear. So Tier 3 war gears, obviously, it's... you only always even get to Tier 3, so that's obviously one reason why you might not see a Tier 3 war gear. It also overlaps a bit in functionality with the Tier 2 Power Fist. Basically, it does the same amount of damage, but the Tier 2 Power Fist does not have an ability. It mainly just has the advantage of being able to be upgraded in Tier 2. And yeah, that's going to be a dead Land Raider Redeemer. We have tank shots going in. Don't even need those Vanquishers. And I mean, I knew that the Vanquishers weren't even necessary, but it just would have helped to counter that Leman Russ even harder. And maybe that was Tex's thinking. Like, maybe he already knew that he had the Land Raider pretty well countered, and that although the Vanquishers would have been helpful, they definitely would not have been necessary. We do have an orbital going in. Tex's tanks are actually not in a great position, and he might... I wonder if he'll lose one or two of them. Tex actually gets out with both of his tanks alive. I think in part due to this is probably a repair bunker. I think this Leman Russ might actually go down, and it does in fact. But I think this is... we're at the point where... yeah. I think that's going to be the game for Tex. Takes out another Predator. GiDDoLo not too happy. This bunker, yeah, this is definitely a repair bunker. So GiDDoLo is not happy about that. He's saying with a bunker you can stop everything. Now, GiDDoLo's a good player. It would certainly beat me. But obviously, yeah, I mean, Tex is saying he didn't even get weapon upgrades on my tanks. One of the things that, I mean, I actually was saying that the Land Raider was just not a good choice. And I think that was pretty much the problem that GiDDoLo had there. The Land Raider itself, as powerful as it is and as much as it is a big tank, it does not do well against other tanks because it does not really have much in terms of AV. It has that multi-melta, but it can't get close enough, really, to the tanks to be effective as AV. And now we just have a Manticore shot. Actually goes off over here, knocking over that Apothecary. And that game does go in favor of Texcalibur, the famous sword of legend. I hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.